You're watching the JJ Podcast. This week, we meet with Tim Wilson, member for Goldstein, one of the Liberal Party's most outspoken and unapologetic voices. Join us as we discuss the devastating Bondi terror attack, what it was like to return to Parliament after being the only candidate to have beaten a Teal, and Tim's passion for small business, industrial relations and employment in Australia.
Well, Tim Wilson, Federal Member for Goldstein, Shadow Minister for Small Business and the Shadow Minister for Industrial Relations and Employment. Tim, thank you so much for making the time to chat with us today.
Thank you, Jamie and Jamie.
Well, I just wanted to...
Or is it Jamie squared?
We could go Jamie squared.
We were going to play with that idea, like was double J, J squared, two J's are better than one? I don't know.
Yeah.
I like two J's are better than one.
Yeah, that is a good one, actually. Tim, I just wanted to start off with chatting on a more of a morbid front and a sad time in this country, and more so because of your community, where the community that you represent has a huge concentration of Jewish residents within Australia. Can you just tell us a bit about what you've been doing these past few days and how your community has handled what's been a dreadful situation in Sydney?
Well, I was at, I started on Friday night. Friday night, I went to Central Shore, which is a synagogue, South African section of the community, the Jewish community in Caulfield South. And it was actually one of the focal points after October 7. There was a protest out the front of it in Princes Park in 2023. And so it's kind of been this kind of focal point at different points over the past couple of years. And I actually went on Friday night, no announcement. I told the rabbi, but it's low key, no speeches or anything else. And I just went along because I wanted to actually support the community because it felt like things were finally returning to normal. And it was just one of those times, when you go and do something, you just don't want any attention, but it was just nice to turn up and say, is it lovely to be here and just to be here to support you because of in a non-eventful time. And that was the spirit in which attendance was there and which it was taken, and we're having a lovely chat with residents and thinking this is going to be a nice close to the end of the year after hostages are returned, 2 years after, obviously, the conflict started and, of course, everything that transpired. And while things are not perfectly settled in comparison to where it's been settled. And on Sunday night, I went to Hanukkah at the racecourse, which is the sister event of Hanukkah by the Sea in Sydney. And of course, as myself and David Southwick were about to take the stage, the events that were unfolding in Sydney were being reported upon. And, of course, the event was cancelled as we were basically about to take the stage and light the Hanukkah. And of course, when you're at a similar event in Melbourne and you're reading what's happening in Sydney, everybody was in a state of deep concern and I won't say panic, but very close to panic, and it was cancelled. And so the community, not just from the events of the previous 2 years, but of course ever since, has sort of almost been re-traumatized from what has happened since. And of course, we start very much by acknowledging the tragic loss of lives to anti-Semitic terror and those who are still fighting for their lives and their loved ones, and just how difficult this must be for Sydney's Jewish community. But everybody in Melbourne in the Jewish community knows somebody either directly being related, friends, networks. Last night there was a service at Caulfield Synagogue, and there were people there who were in Bondi the day before and came home because of that. So it's one of these moments that really brings everybody together, but in a way that, people are deeply uncomfortable that it's necessary, but it is necessary. Yesterday, Senator James Paterson, myself, Jess Wilson, the new opposition leader in Victoria, had a meeting with all the Jewish community leaders as well. And one of the things it started with was a comment by James Paterson saying, I'm sorry we're in this situation, and I don't want to verbal him, but Daniel Aguillon, who's from the Executive Council of Juries, said, I don't accept your apology because it's not yours to give. And he then went on and said a series of other things. But it's clear, obviously, that this is not sort of like an isolated incident. It's 2 years it's been building up, and what I detected last night at the event at Caulfield Synagogue is, as difficult as everybody is finding these moments, there are no hardened hearts, but there is definitely hardened skins. People are really defiant and resilient in these difficult and troubled times, and everyone is looking at how we move forward together because that's what the time compels us. And so at these difficult times, the role of a federal parliamentarian is obviously to be there for the community support, to do whatever we can to assist, and of course, but then also to lead, because the conversation has to be constructive and to channel people's energy to take the conversation somewhere towards constructive reform, to acknowledge what has happened, but also so that it doesn't happen again, and that but it's bigger than just a short-term debate about things like, well, why was this one person there? What is the bigger thematic problem that our society now has that led to this?
It's interesting that you just mentioned two things. You mentioned that it's been building for 2 years, and you mentioned that the community are looking for leadership. Obviously, the Jewish community are more affected than anyone, but I've personally been shocked at the amount of text messages and phone calls and things that I've received over the past day and a half, since yesterday, from family members who aren't normally into this, like into the news and politics and stuff. Like, they're normally very disinterested, people they went to school with. And they're basically saying, like, when will members of our government stand up for Jewish people and call this out for what it is? Who and what, when, like, what is it going to take for government to stand up? And I think people really want to see strength now. It's all good to say, oh, we need unity, and it's all very pleasant. But I think Aussies are angry. They really are.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And this is part of the frustration of the Jewish community, and frankly, the frustration of people like myself, is that we have seen the dark, ugly face of anti-Semitism revealed. And the mask has slowly slipped since October 2023. And it's become more revealed. I mean, we've had fire bombings of synagogues not far from where I physically am now, in Melbourne, about 10 minutes up the road. Obviously, as has been in Sydney, we've had graffitiing and everything else. And it's just been a pattern of behaviour, and it's been building. I think it was, to be frank, a bit of false confidence from the government that once, peace was achieved in between Israel and Gaza, that it would calm down, and it certainly did feel like it had calmed down. And then we have this event, and I genuinely am disappointed in the response so far from the government. I'm hoping that it will improve, because what we need is clarity, and people are looking for it. I mean, genuinely, people are looking for it. They want clarity from their leaders. Moral clarity about where we are and what the way forward is. And if it just allows itself to become this kind of side distraction, as important as gun control is, it's gun control, and there is a deeper evil here, which is to name the anti-Semitism, to talk about what has been allowed to fester, to shine a light on it, and then to talk about the Islamic extremism that has also has underpinned it. If we're not going to talk about that, then we're actually doing a disservice to those who have tragically lost their lives, because the tragedy must be honoured by making sure that it never happens again.
I must say, Tim, I'm so happy to hear that response by you, because what's been really concerning me is all of the discussion around gun laws, and that seems to be the angle that the government's taking as what was the issue on Sunday. And just to hear you articulate it in a way that I know that the Liberals will continue to stand up and make sure that we're having that discussion of the wider problem of gun laws. But let's now take a look at you and your portfolio, because there's a lot that I have to unpack with you, Tim. And I just want to first of all start off. You were the shining light for the Liberals in what was a pretty dark time in May. And, to your credit, you were one of the first people to ring me when I was endorsed to say, all right, we're up against a Teal, let's do this. And you were the only one that was successful in that space. And I just want to get your thoughts on what it felt like to return to Parliament, because you obviously lost your seat in 2022, but you got it back in 2025. What was it like to walk back through those doors as a minister again in May?
So obviously you can't kind of take out what it's like to go back in without talking about what it's like to go out.
Yes.
Here to focus on the good.
No. I think it's really important. I speak quite openly about the process of going out because I don't seek to dissuade or disabuse it of any responsibility. But when you remove from public office, and this is why I have an enormous amount of empathy for my successor and our predecessor, is the process is quite, I use the word violent. It's obviously not physically violent, but it actually feels violent because all of a sudden you're something one day, then you're gone the next, and the world moves on without you. And it's a sort of, but it does feel physical. You're kind of ripped out. And so it's a very difficult process. And then to walk back in, where when you walk in the first time, like I did in 2016, and that hopefully, if you decide to persist, Jamie, then one day you may have that opportunity. It's full of excitement and opportunity because, you're excited about the privilege of being a member of Parliament, about what's going to happen next. But it's also, politely, it's from a position of complete naivety. And of course, I walk in 2025 knowing exactly what I've walked into. And the brutality of the process of being removed. So I'm not saying I was in any sense jaded, but I certainly wasn't naive. And so it was surreal because I walked into a party room. When I left Parliament, we were in government knowing we were up against the wall. And I walked back in and we're in opposition knowing it's going to be very dark and difficult. But I perhaps hadn't fully appreciated just how much of a legacy issue there was from that election, because I came in ultimately full of energy, like, let's go, we can defeat these guys in one term, and I do actually believe that. And I realised there are a lot of people in the corner licking their wounds, and they'd just been through a really rough exercise, whereas I had a very different sentiment. So it's both the forebodings of the responsibility, the privilege, of course, not just of being a member of Parliament again, and being given a second to go by the community, but also, we'd made 3 Australian electoral milestones in getting there, but then the responsibility of what's next. And so what did it feel like? It felt pretty overwhelming.
Well, not only are you in opposition, but this is possibly a government that certainly in our lifetime, we've never seen a government in 1.5 terms run the country into the ground like these guys are. So the responsibility that you have is huge because Australia needs you.
Well, Australia needs, it doesn't just need me or it doesn't just need the opposition. It actually needs everybody because, and unfortunately, I don't want to, draw too many connections to the events in past 48 hours, but there has never been a time in our country where I feel like everything is so fragile and it requires all of us to hold it together. And that's just to hold it together. Then we need a way forward. And certainly the leadership that we need at the moment is not being provided.
One thing, Tim, that I highlighted a few weeks ago is since 2022, under this Albanese government, we've seen more than 30,000 small businesses going insolvent. Now, you obviously are the Shadow Minister for Small Business, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to get you on here to talk about this, because you've been a small business owner yourself and you've worked with startups yourself as well. So you do come into this portfolio with world experience of what you're trying to go and assist with. But when you break that down, it's 20 businesses a day have closed their doors because they simply can't, whether it's afford to keep it open with the energy bills and wages and all of that sort of stuff. And the reason why I was getting frustrated and put this reel out was I don't believe that this current government understands what it's actually like to run a small business and the pressures that they're under. And as a result, I don't see any plan to help people to be able to navigate a really tough situation. What are your thoughts around that at the moment?
Well, it's easy to sort of break down into partisan talking points. I tried to go with objective metrics, and I'll use a really basic one. We looked up recently how many press releases, and press releases aren't a benchmark of output, but it's just a reflection of interest at least. the Minister for Small Business in the Albanese government, we looked at recently how many press releases she'd issued since the federal election. I think we got to a total of 4.
Since May.
And most of them were from other ministers where she was kind of like a sub-minister commenting in the major press release. There's been no major initiatives, nothing. And this is a time when we've had record business insolvencies. We've got a crisis of costs for small business, and there's literally been no effort to do anything about it. And I don't see any championing or chomping at the bits to address it. So I don't see that they have any plan to address it. I think they fund. I don't think they much care, and I don't say that lightly. Labor has this kind of view: you get the big unions, big industry super funds, big government, and big corporates in a room, and you just kind of decide everything from the top down, rather than actually understanding the nation is built from families, communities, and small business up. And so I don't think they much care or see it as that much of a priority. And certainly that's how full small business feels. They feel abandoned. In the new year, we're going to have a very kind of aggressive program to make it clear just how much we're on the side of small business, because you touched on a few of them, which is, around energy bills, the aggressiveness of the ATO, but the complexity of labour laws and what that's doing. It basically makes it impossible to employ people, let alone pay people. I mean, when you've got the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations, who legally have responsibility for the policy around payment of workers, and they can't figure out how to pay their own staff properly, it suggests to me there's a structural problem around employment law. And that's 21st century Australia. And so simplification is necessary, because we've got to make it easy to pay people so that small business can focus on growing their business.
I have a question regarding how you're going to take this to the next election. Like, when you're in the party room and you're the person who's speaking on behalf of small business in the coalition, at the last election, there was two key policies I can think of that were going to help small businesses. One of them would have been the fuel, the 25 cents off fuel for all your tradies and your truck drivers and your people that are out on the road. That would have been a huge thing to help them.
Sure.
And the second thing was the $20,000, was it a tax deduction?
Instant tax.
That's right. Yeah. Instant tax write-off if you were taking your staff or clients out for a meal. It was excluding alcohol, by the way, anyone watching this. It did not include alcohol. But it got slammed by the left. There were a couple of things that not only would it have helped the cafes and the restaurants, they were incentives for business. The left slammed it and then didn't give anything in return.
Can we also just take a side note that Annika Wells was
oh my gosh.
So I had to have a little chuckle.
She slammed it with your baby back ribs, and they are not like us. They are not like us.
Side note.
Can you do that again? That was fantastic.
Anyway, yes. How will you face the backlash?
Well, so we haven't finalised our policy. I need to be clear about that. But I don't worry about backlash. I mean, anyone who looks at my political history knows that when I decide to pick a position, I stick with it. I'm not somebody who's that afraid to have a fight. In fact, quite the reverse. I quite like a bit of biff if that's what's...
Bring back the biff.
Well, but politics is not just about what you're fighting for, it's who you're fighting for. And if we're not fighting for small business, Frank and families, I really actually don't know who we're fighting for as a political movement. And so I plan, and I have a very specific plan, which we'll be rolling out, I hope. It's going to be seen as I would hope it to be very assertively pro-small business, because my basic vision, not just for this portfolio, but for the future of the Australian economy, is we should want every single Australian to either have or aspire to have one or multiple small businesses. Now, not everyone's going to, I accept that, but it should be a pathway that everybody aspires to, or at least feels is a viable option, because I expect that the future of the Australian economy is that salaries will deliver reliability and safety. But if you want to grow wealth, you're going to have to pursue a small business or a side hustle. And so we actually need to create the pathways for people to be able to do that, particularly in the age of artificial intelligence.
Do you have a timeline of when you plan to roll out your small business policy? And the only reason why I ask that is because you and I were both on the ground in the last election, and what I don't want to see again is the Liberals to be rolling out policies just before the election or during pre-poll or anything like that, so that there's long enough to sell it and explain the reasons of why you're going down the path that you are.
Sure. No, my plan will not be by the time we're at the election. It will be so clear where we will be. You don't need to worry about that. My expectation is very much to be doing things very clearly next year.
Before we move on I just wanted to also ask you one thing, because you said a really great line in Parliament recently. And yes, Tim, I do watch all of your speeches in Parliament. So,
dearie me, I'll have to sharpen some of them up there.
It was great. There was one line that I just really liked, and I pulled it out, and I just want you to, you have elaborated on this already quite a bit, but it's just a line that I want to get in there. When small business stands tall, Australia stands strong. And I just loved that. And so I've written it down because I think we'll be able to use that along the way and throughout our campaigning and
we'll put it in all our actions.
But just elaborate on that for us a bit more. And I know you have said a lot of it, but I just think, we know that small business is the backbone of the Australian economy. And is that what this line is about? That when small business is doing really well, a country as a whole is going to be going very prosperously?
Well, Australia's going to be going prosperously, but it goes to that fundamental point, which is how do you see the success of Australia? You can see it as, there's big, tall skyscrapers in the middle of capital cities that everything kind of hangs off it, or you can actually see it coming from community, family, and small business up and germinating across the whole of the nation. Now, some of those businesses are going to be bigger and they're going to, build out more and everything else, but it's got to be small business standing up, not just tall, but proud and confident, because when you've got that, you've got an enterprise culture. And I think this is, frankly, one of the biggest problems our country has right now. I mean, there's lots of problems it's got. There's no point pretending otherwise. We're on a constant road of perfection. But we need an enterprise culture where people actually want to stand confident, independent on their own 2 feet, because that actually inspires others and gives them confidence that they too can have success. And so that's why I see it as directly connected, not just the idea of, yes, commercial hope. It is commercial hope, but it's actually about the type of nation we want to be. It gives the next generation a sense of aspiration beyond just the rhetoric, but to actually seeing, the old line, you can't be what you can't see. If you see people who are being successful, doing things and going, I can do that, or I can learn from that, and how do I go on and achieve that? Whereas if everybody sees a pathway only as, well, one day I'll go and work for the man, for want of a better expression, or work for a large corporate, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. But if that's sort of the only pathway, it means we become a nation of employees and employers, and it's I don't want that. I want a nation where people pursue enterprise. And to feel like they can chance their hand that there is going to be not just reward for effort, but that hard work is going to be rewarded, and that people want to take a risk.
How do you think we get Aussies off the back of the belief that we need the government in every area of our lives? I think COVID was probably the thing that really changed the attitude. I mean, this was global. This wasn't just Australia.
Sure.
But we've got to get off that thought now that we need a subsidy and a handout for everything. And actually stand on our own 2 feet and take accountability. And that's where the coalition need to sell the fact that they will provide a platform whereby the economy can, be self-sufficient, and that we can be self-sufficient. I mean, there's crazy statistics now that 8 in 10 jobs created are from public spending or in the public service. Yeah. Australia's economy has obviously been sinking. The private sector's been outpaced by public spending. The budget's been blown out. We're about to have record high debt. And what's been in the news headlines recently has obviously been all surrounding government waste, perks and entitlements, and the public are furious about it.
Well, people in the private economy are furious about it. If you're a beneficiary of it, you're probably not that upset about it. Oh, yeah. But this is where we're structurally changing the country. But so at the end of the day, how are we going to change that? You're going to change it because you're going to offer something better. People I don't think people wake up and go, one day I really want to be somebody who's dependent on public benefits. Some people might say they want to work in public policy like I do, and that makes me, more likely on balance to work in the public sector. But I've worked in public policy and not been in the public sector. So I don't see that as intrinsically part of it. The biggest problem we've got is got more and more positions being almost entirely dependent on the public purse. We've got to make it attractive for people to not want to do that and to pursue other alternatives or have other pathways. And so I see this as, essential to the small business portfolio, because when we're talking about a small business, or when we're talking about those statistics like 8 out of 10 jobs being created, remember that includes a lot of people who are in small business. It's just that the primary way that we pay for things is through public sector spending. Classic example being something like the NDIS. A lot of people in small business, but the only payer is the taxpayer. So I don't think we should be despondent about it. Australians are hungry. They want to build a better future for themselves, for their community and their country. What we should be wanting to do is harness that energy. But what we should also want is we have to put the incentives in place where people see that as a viable option and to take a chance. So I think we need to be actively incentivizing people to do that. I don't think it's just about, saying, well, what do we need to do around income tax cuts? I think that's kind of part of the conversation, but I think it's got to be much bigger than that. How do we get people to go, I want to take a risk. I want to stand up for myself. I want to do something bigger, bolder, better. And people do that. And then all of a sudden, I don't need to do things the way that I thought I did. I can be more confident. I can be more optimistic about my future. And actually, I lift other people up with me.
Tim, one aspect, now I know that energy is not your portfolio, but I have been at events and I have heard you speak about energy. You articulate the situation very well. I must say, when the Liberals came out and Susan Lee has spoken about the energy policy, she has seemed quite strong in the press conferences that I've seen. One concern I have had with the Liberals is making sure that we don't drop off talking about why you've come to the decision of the energy policy and the energy plan. Like, don't move on to immigration without explaining properly, because I think if we're still explaining in 6 months' time, we've lost it and we're not going to be able to get that back. But businesses, energy prices have gone up by 80% for some businesses, 40% for households. And I remember during the election, the price of energy was something that a lot of small businesses said is contributing to them not being able to keep their doors open. I'd love to get your thoughts on where the Liberals have settled on their energy policy, and is this going to be the solution to help get out of Labor's mess?
Sure, but there's no quick fixes in energy policy, and this is the problem that we all face. This is a problem that's been building up for years because we haven't got any baseload energy investment now really for 20 years. And so what we've said is price comes first. You build our price and reliability, and you'll get the social license to cut emissions. But if you don't worry about price or reliability, no one's going to care about emissions reduction, which, by the way, I've said that consistently along the way. And this is being lived. I mean, Chris Bowen's made a complete hash of the portfolio, and he's not doing what he needs to do to actually fix the price problem. So he's actually creating a bigger problem for emissions downstream for everybody, which is just nuts. So our focus is how do we get baseload energy investment in and bring the future forward on that to get prices down. The more we do that, the more we'll build the outcomes we need for energy prices, energy reliability, and emissions reduction, and a sustainable way forward. Because it has to be, how do we take the whole community forward? Because if you go and flick the light switch on and it doesn't come on, you're not really going to care about what the emissions are. Is the brutal truth. Same as with industry. If they try and turn on their factory and they can't afford the energy, the factory's going to close down, or of course the jobs are going to be lost. And of course, once that happens, people become much less concerned about the environmental consequences. So getting this right is critical, and Labor is just fundamentally getting their hierarchy wrong, and they've got it wrong for a long time because they are putting emissions reduction above everything else. You can't do that. So we're going to get that right. We're going to get it in place. The key thing is, how do you mobilize private capital to get it in faster and quicker. And so the detail of that we're now working through. But our biggest problem is going to be, and this is a global problem, it's a local problem, is we should have made decisions as a nation a decade, 2 decades ago. And so the sooner we make decisions to head in the right direction, the sooner we'll get the dividends. And until we get a change of government, we're going to keep having the same problems. And it's actually, I'm sorry to say this, it's going to get worse, not better.
Well, Tim, I would be kicking myself if I didn't end by asking this question, considering we've just been talking about energy and environment, and you were the only federal candidate who unseated a Teal, and we, of course, are in the seat of Warringah. My husband said, you have to ask Tim, have we reached peak Teal?
Well, the honest answer is I don't know. I mean, I certainly hope so.
Don't we all?
I hope we reached peak Teal in 2019, but I was obviously proven wrong on that.
Yeah.
There's definitely a pathway to doing so, but there's a number of things that we need to do to reach peak Teal as a Liberal Party. First, we need to acknowledge that when we're fighting the Teals, we're not fighting Labor. We've got to approach them differently because they're playing a different game than we are, or we traditionally have when we're fighting Labor. Secondly, that if you want to unseat a Teal, as I have, you need to build out a different campaign than we're traditionally used to building out. But more than anything else, you need to when you're approaching your campaign and how you're selling your message, you need to be addressing them specifically. Because, I mean, I know you're a federal member of parliament. We are not besties, let's just put it that way. But I am just astonished at some of the things that she gets away with. I do not think that she is a very good representative of her community. She will not be surprised for me to hear that. I think she consistently seeks to remove things from the political realm and the democratic realm and move it over to courts and undermine democracy. And I've said that very publicly many times before. And I think this is one of the deep agendas of not just her movement, but a lot of the Teals and the Green movement is that they're actually quite anti-democratic because what they're interested in doing is imposing outcomes on the community. But I think it takes time to explain this to them because I think they trade on people's trust. And I think there's a lot of deceit at the heart of their agenda, and that has to be exposed. But you're not going to get to do that in the last 6 weeks of a campaign. People need to see it. They need to understand it. And it needs to be built over time. And then, of course, we have to be the visionary, aspirational alternative. And, the work I'm doing, I'm not saying it's the only part of it, is very explicitly about addressing that because Warringah is a small business community. It's people who have worked hard, who want to get ahead, who want to live out their best lives, not just for themselves, but for their children, their grandchildren. And we must be the answer to that. And you can lead through fear or you can lead through hope. And if we're not being the agents of change to lead people to lead better lives, then we're failing in our historic Liberal mission.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to chat with you. I know you're busy, but we really appreciate your time and keep up the good fight in Parliament.
Thanks, guys. It was so lovely to chat to you.
So good.
Thank you for listening to the JJ Podcast.